and, plan what stories I want to talk about on my show. See how bad the world really is that morning. And so the first story I saw this morning when I was taking care of business was this one right here. 2 additional Oregon counties vote to become part of Greater Idaho. I thought this is just absolutely hilarious. And obviously, this resonates more with me than maybe some of you because I live in Oregon. And I know the current political landscape of Oregon, and that how it works, if you guys don't know, there is one major city in Oregon called Portland, and it is a hyper liberal city, like more so than most. It's very close to New York City or Los Angeles or Hollywood, San Francisco. It is basically one of those experimental progenitor cities for the liberal agenda. Like, they try out the stupidest, farthest left stuff here first, see how terrible it is, and if it is truly awful, then they push it to other cities and celebrate about it. So, for example, they fully decriminalized all drugs here, because obviously that's not going to lead to problems. It's not like we haven't figured that out it depends on what version of history you believe, but in the thousands of years of documented human history, we know whether it was opioids back in the day, or I should say opium back in the day, or whether it's Percocets and crack and heroin and all the crap in modern day. It doesn't really matter what age you're living in. We've always known when you allow people uninhibited access to drugs with no punishments, no regulations, society goes downhill immediately. Immediately. And this is proof of why I always say humans are not good at a default level. We're evil. We are slaves to sin. And so when you put temptation right there in front of weak people, yes, self-accountability is part of this, but when you do understand that there's a lot of people who don't yet have self-accountability, who don't yet have self-discipline, that's why we have laws. That's why we have to tell people what to do, because not everybody is there yet. Myself, I'm one of them. I didn't have self-discipline, at least when it came to eating and studying. I put off my college degree until I was in my mid to late 20s because I didn't have the discipline to study. I put off my health and, getting in good shape until my late 20s because I didn't have self-discipline. So I'm not sitting here bashing people who get addicted to drugs as, you're just completely weak-minded, you never had a chance in the first place. What I'm saying is that this is why we have a safety net of laws to support people who can't necessarily make the right decisions themselves. And so when you remove the safety net for all drugs and you say none of them are a criminal offense, you end up with rampant addiction, which turns into rampant homelessness, which turns into rampant crime. And the fact that people get confused by these outcomes, like, I don't know how any of this happened. It's pretty baffling. So that is the state of Oregon right now. This shitty little liberal Portland city has basically become the speaker for the entire state. We end up electing a blue governor every election, a Democrat, a liberal, despite the fact that the rest of Oregon, all the rural counties, are actually pretty based country folk. They just want to have their horses and be left alone. That's true for pretty much like 80 to 90% of the rest of Oregon. But because Portland is the major metropolitan area, they become the identity of Oregon. And look, we just lost in the midterms. I put my vote in for Drazen, the Republican governor, and no dice. Not surprised. So anyway, this is what you get. Now we're basically looking at a civil war, a secession of counties from Oregon. They're like, look, we're tired of this shit. We don't even want to be a part of this state anymore, okay? the election fraud, you guys misrepresenting with your elected officials the will of this state, this isn't what we want. We don't want liberal leaders. We don't want all drugs being decriminalized. We don't want to defund the police. We don't want to have the record in the United States for the number of strip clubs. If you didn't know that, fun fact, Portland, strip clubs capital of the United States. And you know what's funny is I moved here 7 years ago from Alabama. And somebody told me that fact pretty early on. Like, hey, did you know Portland is the strip club capital of the United States? And I just kind of shrugged and I was like, of course I didn't know that and I don't really care. I've never once been to a strip club in my life, not a single time. But I didn't really make the analysis at the time. I didn't read into it that probably says something huge about the culture. When that's how you treat women and that's how you view sexuality, that it's all performative. There's no meaning behind it. There's no emotional attachment behind it. It wasn't founded in love. When that's how you treat sexuality, is it any coincidence that the rest of the city looks the way it does? The debauchery, the filth. Anyway, so Oregon, I don't know what the fate is here. I don't know if this will actually work, these counties trying to secede from the state. I think it's pretty awesome, honestly. I hope it works. I have friends in Idaho, and I should probably talk to them and let them know that they might be getting some new neighbors. Some Oregonians are coming to hang out with you guys, and they'll get along great. If you didn't know, Idaho is also a very conservative state. And basically what's happening is, as Oregon has, by the way, for the first time, a net population decrease year over year. Despite the fact that people are being born, people are having babies in Oregon, people move to Oregon. More people are leaving Oregon than both of those combined. And look, you don't have to go that far back to figure out why. It's a guy named George Floyd. You ever heard of him? Well, fentanyl addict, forged money criminal, Saint George Floyd, and his altercation with whatever that guy's name was, Chavanaugh, something like that, the police officer, who we found out didn't even really kill George Floyd. George Floyd killed himself with his drug addiction. Anyway, all that stuff caused the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020. Is it 2020 or 2021? And, on top of them locking down the entire city for months at a time because of COVID, you created this dynamic. Just think this through. Seriously, you don't have to be an intelligent person. You told everybody that you can't go to church, you can't go to work, you can't go to the gym because of COVID. Okay? Everybody stay home. You can't live your normal life at all. However, when this fat black guy on drugs dies, you are now permitted to just disregard all of that, all of the COVID precautions, everything that we were arresting people for when they tried to go to church. You are allowed to go out into the streets and burn down Wendy's, break the windows of the banks, go assault the Capitol building in your city, destroy downtown. You're allowed to do all that. There's no problems with COVID being transmitted to one to another when you're doing that. But if you wanted to go to the gym and train during all that, can't do that. So, in other words, you said, criminals, no laws for you. If you want to do drugs, that's fine. If you want to destroy property, that's fine. All in the name of racial justice. But if you want to go take care of your physical health, minding your own business at the gym, you're going to jail. Sorry to break it to you. If you want to practice your constitutionally protected right, freedom of religion, you're going to jail. Sorry. Can't do that. If you want to light up a dumpster and push it down the road, you can do that. So that's why you see a net population decline in Oregon. People are actively leaving. And that's why you see entire counties of Oregon trying to leave the state and just become part of another state. It's hard for me to say that without just, breaking down laughing, because it's hilarious, but the people we're not going to stand for this. The average American, the silent majority, some people call it that. Nobody wants any part of this. The whole liberal experiment that's being literally forced by law upon everybody is not a popular ideology. It doesn't represent the will of the people. The only reason these Democrats who represent those policies and enforce those policies get elected, it's not because of the popularity, it's not because of the votes, it's because of the election interference fraud. We talked about this yesterday in Arizona, where explain this to me, because I already know you're thinking, Josh, there's no proof of election fraud and election interference. There's no proof of that. Well, we talked about what's going on in Arizona yesterday. We just got the official news that Kari Lake lost, who was running for governor against Katie Hobbs. Who is Katie Hobbs, you might ask? Katie Hobbs was the Democrat candidate who would not debate her opponent, Kari Lake. She literally would not go on TV and defend her policies. What does that tell you about any politician? You don't have to, this isn't a right, left, red, blue, Democrat, liberal, conservative, progressive. That's not even what I'm talking about. Anytime you have an election for public office, we the citizens deserve to see the candidates debating each other. Because we need to know that you can defend your policies when people poke holes in them, and maybe they expose something you didn't think about. This is just how politics works. This is how constructive leadership works. You have to be able to defend your agenda, all the policies you want to impose on the people. You need to be able to speak about those things. So Katie Hobbs would not do a debate with her opponent, Kari Lake, the entire midterm campaigning season. So then you get to actual election day. All the mail-in ballots take forever. Okay, we get all the Republican votes in nice and early. Looks like Kari Lake's doing great because Republicans tend to go and vote on election day. It takes another week, 6 days, to get the rest of the mail-in ballots, which are easily forged, which you can easily count to figure out how many do we need rather than how many are there actually here. And so all the mail-in ballots come in, and shocking story, what do you know? Kari Lake loses. Nobody saw that coming. But here's another detail about that story. I'm not just suggesting there was election fraud because they used mail-in ballots. When you dug deeper into the other offices that were up for election, such as state treasurer, you saw that more Republicans showed up to vote for their state treasurer candidate than Republicans showed up to vote for state governor. Okay, so if you're a little slow, maybe you don't follow politics, you're not, okay, what's the point you're making here, Josh? Just, okay, put yourself in a voting citizen's shoes, and let's just say you kind of feel like things in your state aren't going well, and so that's why you're going to vote. You're going to go vote for some candidates. And if things are not going well in your state, what do you typically consider as the most important office to vote for on the ballot? State governor, right? The person running your state. Like, this is like Civics 101. I think we may have learned this in 6th or 7th grade. You want to vote for the person running your entire state. That's the most important election. Now, if you're especially politically aware and fiscally aware of how your state's budget is being managed, sure, you probably would want to vote for a state treasurer also. Keyword also, not instead of. No actual socially conscious voter is going to go to the ballot wanting to see change in their state, so they're clearly voting Republican in a blue state, but only decide to vote for treasurer. Come on, guys. Like, I know a lot of you are hesitant because you don't want to be called crazy. You don't want to be called an election denier. You don't want to be accused of attacking democracy. You don't want to be thrown in jail, let's be honest. Look at all the January 6 people. But the whole narrative that the Democrats have spun is, if you question elections, you're an election denier, you're a threat to democracy, we need to put you in jail. But then when you explain the evidence, the reasons why we should be very skeptical of our elections, in my opinion, they make pretty common sense to the average person. So anyway, Oregon lost its election. Arizona lost its election, and now you have entire counties trying to move to another state because of poor leadership. Not surprising, but, well, that transitions very well into my next topic, and technically an announcement